nations have to have some framework within which they design their policies and bring their citizens together. And although there can be some divergence of opinion in certainly in a democratic context, so people can choose different political parties which have slightly different visions, usually, I would say always, there has to be some agreed framework within which people agree they want to operate. So I think it's fundamental to nationhood that there is some understanding or vision of how society should be organized for it to be able to work. Otherwise, you end up with civil war. It's been a long time now, since 1945, that they have had this deep hostility to the US and capitalism, and the leadership of North Korea, the Kim family, have been absolutely opposed to the US and capitalism. So it would undermine the leadership of the Kim family to now say, oh, we're going to go capitalist after all. It would also mean losing its financial, technological, and international support base from Russia and China. So there'd be huge losses if North Korea suddenly did a U-turn and went capitalist. Well, it's the other side of the coin, really. If you go back to 1945, they've taken a strong position in ROK against socialism and both the Russian and Chinese forms of communism. So they've had this very long tradition now of being opposed to those things. So I think many citizens believe in South Korea that it would lead to a loss of individual freedom, a loss of employment possibilities in the private sector. It would lose US investment and technological support, and perhaps almost most significantly, the nuclear umbrella, as we call it, provided by the US. It would lose widespread private ownership of shares in companies which are the basis of people's pensions and savings. And I think also people in South Korea value freedom of expression. I remember watching from a hotel in Seoul, people marching up and down the streets on Saturdays and shouting their slogans against one another or for one another. But they value the opportunity to express their political views freely without the risk of being put in prison. So all of those things, I think, make it difficult for South Korea to accept a more restrictive regime, which is normal under socialism. A reunified Korea would require a new framework, which is different from both capitalism and socialism. One possibility would be to adopt what we've called relationism as an alternative, which has a different starting point. So it doesn't start with the freedom of the individual, and it also doesn't start with the role of the state as, in inverted commas, the vanguard of the proletariat, that is, the leading part of the army of people in terms of social change. So it is a very different system. It emphasizes that relationships between people and between organizations, between ethnic groups, is the most important secret to achieving social harmony and happiness in a society. That's the starting point. And that leads on to many different organizations or institutions in every part of public life. I can just give you a very brief outline of a few key points. So I think both North and South Korea would call themselves democracies, but the main point is that you allow everybody to have a vote in terms of but you give them real alternatives. You say, do you want this or do you want that? So that they can choose between options. It seems to me that's important for people to own the political policy framework that they are living under. Secondly, business institutions would not be primarily focused, as in North Korea, on the state as the owner of the capital, nor on private individual shareholders. It would not emphasize that like capitalism does. Rather, you would look at business being organized to reward all the major stakeholders in a balanced way. So all the four major stakeholders are employees, customers, suppliers, and the shareholders. So whether the shareholder is the state or whether the shareholders are private shareholders, but the business is trying to maximize the revenue and benefit to all of those four: the suppliers, the customers, the employees, and the organization or individuals which own the shares. So it's a more balanced approach to how you run the business than either socialism or capitalism. And then education is not so much focused on the achievements of the individual. It's not what I achieve by myself. It's much more thinking cooperatively, as they do in Finland, where people are taught in school much more to think in a cooperative than a competitive way. How can we as a class, how can we as a community work so that our community benefits or our class benefits, our class being our, at school, literally the classroom, the class to which you belong at school. How can we as a group organize ourselves to benefit the group cooperatively rather than simply competing as individuals? So it spills out into so many aspects of life.